for joining us. I am Casey, and this is my friend Trisha. We are both HubSpot admin consultants. A little bit of a broad term, but let's go with that for the day. And if you're joining us today, I hope you are here to talk about list grooming and list hygiene inside of HubSpot. Trisha, this is one of your suggestions. We have a joint client that's having some issues with this. I'm going to talk a little bit about why this is a problem. I can jump in.
It's a problem. It's a problem because HubSpot doesn't let you have infinite lists. At
That
some
is
point, they're like,
problem
"Oh, you
one.
got."
That
In this particular instance of HubSpot, I think it is in the neighborhood of 7 to 8 years old. There is a team of, let's say, half a dozen people that are working in it pretty regularly.
Mhm.
But they're like, actually, in terms of active users, it's more like 15.
Yeah, I thought it was higher. Yeah.
I think the actual list makers, I'm gonna call that 8 people.
8 possible list makers.
Yeah. But over the course of all this time,
Mhm.
there are, over 1,000 lists at this point. I have myself, I think, because they work for my brand, really good at naming conventions. I can
Mhm.
always find what I'm looking for, but I worry that the other people on the team, that they get in there and they're just, I can't find anything ever. It wouldn't be surprised me if that was the case.
Yeah, I mean, I've worked with Trisha long enough that I know her naming structure. So that's helpful. I can go in and find a list that Trisha's created. But yeah, so I mean, there's 3 problems with having too many lists in HubSpot. One is the limits. That's the one that's most likely to drive you to action. But
Because
that's
this
definitely.
is, I'm so excited to find out, you know, your approach to the grooming part of this, because it's a big, it's a big kind of spaghetti beast. How do you get your arms around it?
Spaghetti beast. The other kind of potential issues of having too many lists, and I think this is fair to say up front, like almost every portal gets list bloat over time. Like you said, this portal is like 8 years old. After 8 years, a lot of people have touched it. A lot of lists have happened. And so this is a very common thing. And you're going to hit your limits. Duplication of lists is also like very high up there. It's both a cause of too many lists and a result of too many lists, like both. And that's the other pain point that I think that's the pain point that this should be a bigger deal sooner, but usually it doesn't actually become big deal until you hit the limits. And then the last potential issue is performance drag. And that's really the reason that HubSpot has list limits, is because if you were to create infinite lists, like your portal's going to slow down. HubSpot servers probably would at some point like freak out. I don't know like globally what the implications are. But if you're noticing that your lists are taking longer to populate, one of the reasons is probably the number of lists that you have in your portal. So today we'll share both reactive and proactive tips to manage this. And I know, Trisha, you like to discuss who this is a best fit for. If you're a HubSpot admin, either accidental or on purpose, this is for you. If you're a marketing manager, a sales manager, generally, if you are in a position that you're managing people who create lists, or creating lists yourself, those are anyone who creates lists. We welcome you here today. And be the change. So even if you're not actually in a management position, you could be the change to help reduce the confusion and duplication of lists.
Yeah, and you're going to have a head start because Casey and I are going to discuss strategies for how to get your hands around the spaghetti monster, so that if you're not the change maker, you can help them understand it's not that big a deal. You can do it.
You can do it. So I think it becomes scary. So the mutual client we have is approaching their limit. I think they're over or very close to 2,000 lists. And that is overwhelming, like truly, truly fair to say. What do you do when you have 2,000 lists? Their limit is 2,100. I just checked. So they're not quite to 2,000 yet, but they are approaching that 2,000 mark, which is why it has come up in our lives to discuss. And there's a few approaches that I think you can take at this point to audit like what to do when you're nearing the limit. Number one is sorting by creation date or last update date, and looking at your old lists. Actually, the client reached out to me yesterday, sent me a screenshot of the like oldest page of lists in HubSpot and said, can I just delete all of these? And I said, maybe.
Not necessarily.
And probably worth noting, like one of the things that makes this difficult is in reports, you can reference when a report was last referenced or used, visited. You can't, that doesn't exist on lists at this time, May 22nd, 2025. If tomorrow I have an update, you can. But whenever I make statements like that, I like to highlight that that is true as of this exact moment in time. But yeah, you definitely can and should start with some of those old lists, especially if your portal is 8 years old. It's very possible, and especially if that list has not been updated in 8 years, it may be a list you can delete. Where you want to be careful is sometimes those first lists are kind of fundamental lists that don't need to be updated. Like your list of all contacts with a lifecycle stage of customer, sure, it hasn't been touched since your portal was created, but it doesn't need to. It's still, but that doesn't mean that the list isn't important. So I think one thing to always keep in mind is like keeping context while you're having someone that has some context maybe is important when cleaning up lists. And it's actually why I don't love being the person to clean up lists as a like contractor, because I will never have the context of someone inside the organization. I pride myself on being a part of the team with my clients, but at the end of the day, like I'm usually part of a team. I'm often not part of the organization. So definitely start with creation date. Also, you can sort by last updated date and look at the old list there too. And then the last thing I would sort by is the number of objects on the list. If you have a bunch of lists that have 0 records in them, whether those are contacts, deals, whatever your list is, you might not need those lists. There's exceptions again to all of those. We talked about the creation date or last update date. Just because it hasn't been created or updated in the last 5 years doesn't mean that it's not a referenced list or something used. And if there's 0 contacts, maybe it still might be being referenced. I create lists a lot where I'm like, I check in on them to see if a problem has occurred. So ideally those will have 0, but that doesn't mean that I want to get rid of them. I actually do want to keep referencing those. But those are some things too.
I have some other ideas. I'd like to know what you think about them.
Let's go.
There's whether or not it's used in the used in column, which indicates how many other things the list is used in.
Mm-hmm.
I generally feel a lot safer deleting a list, number one, if it's not used anywhere else.
Mm-hmm.
To your point though, if it is a core list, it could very well end up in there. So you have to be careful of those, but that's one indicator. And then also like last creator or last updated user, if they're people that are no longer in the portal,
mm-hmm.
That can also be a good clue.
Yeah. I think you're right. I think those are all good things. But as you said, they all have, none of these are like, you can always delete a list if it's not used anywhere. I wouldn't say that.
Yeah.
All of these have like exceptions to the rule. Like there's, unfortunately, I don't have like a hard and fast rule around like, you can delete these lists.
There's one hard and fast rule. is I recommend that whenever you're creating a list that you know you don't need tomorrow or the next
Mhm.
day, label it in a way that it's obvious to you and hopefully to anybody else that that's trash. And that'll be your no-brainer pool of like, I know it's always safe to delete these guys.
I agree, and Trisha, you've taught me this exactly, and actually, I have a lot of clients that have seen me. I learned it from you, and now a lot of my clients have learned it from me. I put temp, and then oftentimes I'll put my initials at the beginning of, a list that I know I'm creating for, like, just a short period of time, um, and now a lot of my clients do that too. You can do temp, you can do test, you can do, trash, whatever.
Whatever,
Um,
delete. But if you're
I
not doing that already, start that today because
Yes,
that'll help in the future.
I agree. That will be a big, um, a major way to prevent things moving forward. It's just having some sort of naming and like everything, communicating that across the team to say, "Hey, let's do this." Um, Also, the other list to, like, kind of low-hanging fruit to look for when you're auditing is campaigns or events that happened months, years ago. Um, Oftentimes, I guess I'll say, people aren't still looking back on how dinner LA 2021 went. Um,
Yeah. Uh I think it depends on who's managing your events and what sort of efficiency metrics they're
Just
looking at and
because
how many of your
things
events are
change and then
repeat
you're
events. If it's an event that you do every year,
mhm.
there might be some value in holding on or just transferring that data to its spread because lists change, right? People get deleted, people whatever. I've always thought there's a lot of value in like capturing that data from somewhere, and at some point, a list is not the place to keep that because it's not something that you can look at over time, not easily.
And, the HubSpot campaign tool has made a lot of improvements over the last few months, years. It's very possible that you are using lists in a way that you can now use the HubSpot campaign tool or even the HubSpot event tool, marketing event tool. That also has made a lot of improvements lately. I used to use lists, and to be honest, I haven't totally changed my behavior, but you can.
Okay. So what about like webinar attendees?
Marketing event.
Make it a marketing event instead.
However, I will say campaign-specific lists, and this is actually what our first step will be with this client. I don't know if you know this, Trish. I actually don't think you know this.
I don't know
Um,
this.
what we'll be doing first is looking at all events, marketing, webinars, conferences, anything that happened 2024 and earlier, and converting them to static lists. And then we still have those lists to reference. But the event already happened, like, and sometimes they should, like a webinar, when you create the webinar list, it should be a smart list. You wanna see who registered, you wanna see who attended, you don't it's not static at that time. But there are some updates recently where you can convert lists to static lists. Um,
I always convert event lists to static lists at the end of the event because things change and then your list like you look at the numbers 2 months later and it doesn't quite match up.
Mhm.
So I always just build that into my workflows. If it's a webinar, if it's a show, if it's like something, the people who came to your booth, I always convert it to static when you're
Yeah,
done.
so you can convert the list to static manually. You also have these options to auto convert.
Oh, I like that. Except I would like it to do it maybe after inactivity is okay because you're not going to be adding any new people to it. I love that.
So definitely check out this feature, the auto convert to static on your event lists,
But you have a
because
cap on static list too, right?
you do, but you're often not hitting it. So it gives you a little bit of wiggle room typically. Typically, the what I'm seeing people hit is their active list limit.
Okay.
So that's definitely worth looking at. Um, who should own cleanup? You should definitely define a process owner, whether that's RevOps or marketing ops. Again, I find being on the outside does not often put me in the best position to own the list cleanup. Sure, I can take actions, but owning I tend not as an outsider to be the best person. So just keep that in mind. And then whoever is should definitely communicate before deleting shared list, Slack messages, whether that's a maybe it's a spreadsheet of all of the lists that you're deleting and just sharing that with the people who are using lists in HubSpot. Something I also like to do is kind of make this a two-part process. First, you might rename the list flagged for deletion. You might spell deletion correctly. And then I might even convert this to a static list just to get it out of like the immediate triage mode. You can convert static list back to active list as of a few months ago or weeks ago even. And then you could even say something like, contact Casey if still using. Then wait a month, 2 months. Honestly, I would probably wait at least a quarter. And then you can go and delete the list after that. Do remember to do that. I know I work in a portal that has a bunch of workflows flagged for deletion, but none of them are deleted. I think they all got flagged and then basically never followed up. But doing something like this is a good way to just check to make sure, and then you can go back and delete them. The reason I would wait a quarter at least, personally, I use some lists for quarterly reporting. You might use some lists for end of year reporting, so like there's an argument there. But there are lists that I use for reporting purposes that I reference only once a quarter. But if that list was deleted, I would have to hopefully remember all of the filters.
Hey, operationally, how are you going? So you need a way to organize your plan of attack against this. I think it's like 1,800 lists probably. You've got different types of lists in there. Like you have event lists, you have channel lists that like here's how many people you have in organic, direct, etc. You have lead lists, you have whatever. And it seems like, well, anyway, I'm just kind of wondering if that's how you would approach it, by sort of looking at all of them and then trying to categorize them, because when you get to the ones that you're not sure about, you'll also need a way to communicate with your client and say, here's the ones that I think could be deleted. Can you take a look? How are you planning to do that? Are you planning to do everything live within the platform, or are you going to export it into Excel? What do you think?
I'm gonna do the low-hanging fruit in the platform. So doing that initial like cleanup in the platform. I believe, can you export? Yeah, you can export list. A best practice would probably be to export the list, and then, I mean, yes, that will be a big file, but honestly, not like that bad, because you can probably fairly quickly like in an Excel document, filter the ones you need to keep. And you would be able to do that based on like used in and stuff like that. You may even be able to, if you have them exported, sending that data to an AI tool and having AI flag potential duplicates just by names. Then you can check to see if they actually are duplicates or not. I think that would probably be the best case scenario. And then you're documenting what got removed and things like that.
especially for those iffy ones.
Yeah. I also would recommend, so just thinking through like avoiding this problem in the future, naming conventions, which you mentioned, Trisha, is probably the biggest one. Everyone agreeing on a naming convention, that's going to help prevent duplicates for you specifically, because people are going to be able to find the list that they're looking for. So I would definitely say that's number one. I know, Trisha, you put the year that the list was created in there.
We don't need that anymore because now we have created date.
Correct.
And we also have updated. So I was using it as both created and updated, and we have that now, so it's not necessary anymore.
I do think sometimes if naming conventions are too complex, then people stop using them. So just, also like objects, you have to, like, a lot of times, like this one, contacts by Nico, accounts by Nico, but you can see the, like, you could just do like created
by Nico. You gotta call it something though. You can't call it just Nico. George B. Thomas had a great suggestion on one of your dailies this week in your Wake Up with HubSpot podcast, and whatever you call that. And it was you can AI this as well. You can tell AI how you use HubSpot and then have it generate. It's like a starting point, a launch point for you to kind of react to. Here's what HubSpot recommends as naming conventions.
Yeah. But just make sure you communicate that across your team. Whoever's creating lists should, and really whoever's referencing lists should understand the nomenclature, because that will help them find the list that they're looking for. The other thing is, and this is big, and probably not surprising, but it has to be mentioned, permissions and training, reducing the list creation access to only people who understand how to create lists. This sometimes can backfire if then you have your sales team asking for every list this way and that way. So just consider that. But I also majorly recommend views instead of lists. I think when I was a young HubSpot user, I created lists when I should have been creating views. And I think that's one thing, if your sales team is not creating, if you don't give your sales team permission to create lists, show them how to use views. This very well could be a better source for them, because they can reference it here, they can click into them, they can change the filters.
And they can save them.
So definitely think through whether you really need a list, or is a view sufficient.
Go back to the list front page, and I wanted to make sure, we talked about used in. So just in case everybody is not aware, that field tells you how many workflows, reports, other lists, like everywhere that list is used. That's where you get that information.
That's it. So we talked naming conventions, permissions, trainings, views, also reports. You may, a report may be a better fit for what you're doing than a list. So consider that too. However, I will say reports can get bloated too. And I've seen that also happen. Naming convention across both is the biggest advice I could give you. All right. Any final thoughts?
So we talked about kind of your low-hanging fruit, or the biggest things that you would look at first. And so sorting by the oldest date, not like there's exceptions to all of these, but that's one way to look at the data. Finding all of your past campaign and events. That's another one. Looking for lists created by people that are no longer in your organization. That's another one. Any other like big slam dunks? Not slam dunks, but like things where you think that there are pools of opportunity?
what I will be doing is, starting with the oldest list or least updated lists that have no records in them, deactivated users, used in zero, all of those. Looking for opportunities to convert lists from active lists to static lists. Those are the big ones. And like looking at any temporary or any lists that are like campaign specific, whether those be events, webinars, whatever, that could be converted to static. Those are the major ones. And after I do that, what I think I'll do next is export the lists and send them to ChatGPT to flag duplicate lists. Because with 2,000 lists, it's going to be hard for me.
Explain how you're going to do that.
I'm going to export the lists. I really just need the name and the object type. Probably the number of records too would be helpful. It'll send me that. And then I'm going to send name, list size, object, those columns to ChatGPT and say, can you flag potential duplicate lists?
Okay. That's a great use of AI.
Thank you.
I'm looking forward to hearing how it worked.
Yeah.
Should we do this again next week with like what you learned after going through this?
Sure. That seems easy enough.
I'm sure you'll learn a few new things along the way.
I'm sure I will.
Never mind.
I think the biggest thing is the naming conventions, and specifically having like a temporary, what I've used as temp, a temporary naming convention. That's an easy flag. Also, probably worth noting, you don't have to, while one person does have to like lead this does not have to fall on one person. I think what people can go and clean up the list that they've created. And so, especially if you export the list, you'll have the creator name in there and you can start kind of assigning it to other people and being like, hey, Trisha, you have 20 lists that have temp in the name. Can you review them? Hey, Casey, there are 50 lists that you created in 2020. Can you go through your list from 2020 and take a look at whether or not they still are relevant?
Mm-hmm.
So keep that in mind too.
That's
and it's just idea. A part of general portal hygiene. So don't feel alone, or there's not a problem when you start to get close to your list limit. It's just part of it. But it is unfortunately something you have to address. Otherwise you'll hit the limit.
And to your point, if you do, like, let's say you're able to remove 25% of your list, you will most likely appreciate faster list generation. Like, and that's something, anybody who's sitting there waiting for those lists to generate, it gets tedious. So that's an upside to doing this work.
Yeah. So if this is your first time doing list cleaning, it is overwhelming. I recommend doing it in chunks, starting with the low-hanging fruit, converting things to static where you can. That way you're not just like deleting something, and you can always turn back if it needs to be turned back. And then, maybe we'll follow up next week on findings, if ChatGPT was able to help me or if I gave bad advice to everyone out there.
I mean, I just wonder how, well, that's low-hanging fruit, right? If it's got like, if every word in the list is a duplicate, that's not anything you're going to be able to easily find in Excel.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But it's something that ChatGPT certainly would be able to figure out.
Mm-hmm.
We could even do anyway, it'll figure it out. It'll do something that's helpful.
I think it will. More on that soon. All right. Thank you for joining us today. Thanks, Trisha, for chatting. And we will see you all back here next week for part 2. I still had a lot of stuff on my list too, so more to say.